This video was made possible with the help of Game Toppers. Upgrade your gaming experience with a Game Topper.
Hello chaps and chappets, welcome to this Board Games Everybody Should video where I'm going to talk to you about this game here, this big elephant which is hidden in a big box called Foundations of Rome. In this video I'm going to give you a quick overview of how the game plays, and then I'm going to give you my first impressions after playing this game 3 times. So in Foundations of Rome, players are going to receive a board full of buildings and a handful of money depending on the turn order around the table. They're also going to be dealt 6 cards which correspond to the spaces on the board. Now the board will be different for every game depending on the number of players, and the amount of spaces used obviously corresponds to the amount of players that are playing. After receiving these 6 cards, you're going to place little tokens of your colour on those spaces on the board. These are plots of land that you actually own. During the course of the game, you're going to be buying more of these from the marketplace, and you're going to be then building buildings in those spaces which fit those spaces to try and gain more points. The remaining cards which correspond to the remaining spaces on the board are divided into 3 piles. These will be the 3 eras where 3 different stages of scoring will be taking place. In every era, you will take some cards and place them in the market. As these cards are purchased, you will replace them from the cards from the same era. Once all the cards are gone from that era and from the marketplace, whoever buys the last card will trigger the end of this round, so to speak. Every player will then have one more chance to do an action, including the player that took the last card, and then you'll do a scoring. You'll collect money from your commercial buildings and also collect maybe some victory points. If you have any civil buildings, you will score points according to whatever buildings are attached to them, not diagonally but only orthogonally. And finally, you'll look at the population track and see who has the largest population. They will score the amount of points of their population plus a bonus, and then the player with the second most will score as many points as the population of the first player, and carrying on back down the chain. Once this is done, a new era starts. You take the deck of cards, distribute them out into the market, and continue play. The only thing that's different after the 3rd era is any spaces that you still own which haven't been built on will give you a point, as well as any money that you're supposed to collect will actually be in victory points. So starting with the start player, they will have a choice of 3 actions. The first action is they can buy a building from the marketplace. They will spend the money that they have according to where it is on the market track, take that card and place one of their markers in that space. If you don't have a marker or you don't have the money to buy that card, you cannot buy it. Simple as that. The market is then shuffled along and replaced with a new card, and then the next player can take their turn. If you don't wish to buy a plot of land, you can actually build on your land. You basically take one of your buildings which is the same size as the land that you have, so you may have 1 space, which means that you can place a 1 space building on it. If you have 2 spaces adjacent, obviously you can build a building which is 2 spaces. You can also replace an existing building that you have, but as long as the building that you're replacing it with is larger. Sometimes this might open up an extra space which you've bought, but your current new building will not fulfill, so you just place one of your tokens in that space to say that you still own that land. Now, there are 3 different types of building in the game. There are the civilization buildings, which will give you population, which you'll mark on your population track. You'll have your commercial buildings, which will give you revenue and victory points at the end of every era. And then you have your civic buildings, which will give you points for the buildings that they are attached to. Now, it's not just your buildings, but it's any other player's buildings. So instead of building, you can do the last thing, which is collect income. The income that you collect is always 5 pieces of money, whatever you want to call it, sesterces. But you'll also get a bonus for every commercial building that you have as well. And there you have it. You continue to keep playing round and round through the 3 eras until all the cards are gone, do scoring, and then find out at the end of the game who has won by having the most points. So, Foundations of Rome is a board game that everyone with a family and the financial expenses and the space to put it in should invest in. This is a nice kind of family weight game for up to 5 players. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I've played this game 3 times. Twice as a 4-player and once as a 2-player. And that's just the base game. That's not with the expansions which are included in here. There are several, one including the monument, which will give you some extra common buildings which score extra ways, will give you bigger population or bigger income. And then there's the other expansions, which are secret powers, which players will start with at the beginning of the game, and a few other bits and pieces. None of it really kind of interests me. The base game alone is pretty much the done deal. It's pretty much fun as it is. For the game itself, it is relatively easy to teach and pretty quick to pick up on. It feels like many other games. The most relatable is, and you're probably going to hear this a few times, is New York 1901 for me personally. I've already done a review of this game. It's down in the show notes if you want to go and click and have a look at that. But it's pretty much the same thing, but the only difference is all the buildings are 3D in this game instead of being a flat tile. And that's where this game kind of has its kind of highlight, is in the components. But before I get to the components, let's talk about the gameplay itself. So as I said, the rules are pretty straightforward. There are 3 actions, which is very easy to teach people. The thing which can be a little bit hard to teach people is the civic buildings, with how they score. Sometimes people misinterpret what you say, and then, oh, it's like that, is it? Okay. And then they understand after a while. The game is a bit repetitive. The best kind of strategy that I have found is, and probably what a lot of people will probably do, is buy some plots of land and obviously try and buy in a cluster and a clunk together, and then start building the commercial buildings, because when you take an income, you can get a lot more money, which will give you the, that possibility to grab something else that you want before someone else grabs it. So the interaction is kind of minimal, because it's basically in the market, and it's like a bidding war, and when it's your turn, do you buy the card which is the cheapest because it's the cheapest, and you can buy more land that way with the money that you collect, or is it best to go for the ones that are, as I said, adjacent to areas that you are already located in, so you can make bigger buildings? There's a nice little kind of like way of thinking about how you're going to play in that way. But basically, you can be the nasty person, so the interaction becomes a bit more kind of aggressive when players see that, this plot of land is now 3, and they see that it's your turn next, and they can see that you've got like 3 locations next to this place, and they snap that up just to stop you building a nice big square building in that area. So there is that kind of like, you can do that kind of backstabbery kind of interaction there. The other bit of interaction comes from the civic buildings themselves, because these score points from the buildings that are adjacent. And so placing one of these a bit later in the game, when other players have placed some of their buildings and they know that they're not going to move, will generate you lots of points, and maybe sometimes generate your opponents a few points as well. And so there's like, you have to think about what you're going to place, where you're going to place it, and when you're going to place it, to try and keep ahead, so you know, so to speak, ahead of the Joneses. So the game can feel kind of bland if you keep doing the same strategy of buying lots of land and then placing your money grabbing buildings on it before the end of the first era and grabbing as much money as you can. And again, that's another nasty way to play. Someone could just play and just keep collecting income and then absorb all the money in the bank, making it harder for the other players to do their actions. We've run into this situation, it's not explained in the rule book, where there was no money in the bank and it was like, well, can we do the income action anyway? And in this version we have the metal coins and the punch out tokens, so I said why not, because it's not in the rules what you do, so we had extra money. But reading online, they say that the money is limited for a reason, and so no one can take the action. But as I said, someone could be really nasty and just keep taking all the money, leaving other players stumped due to the fact that they need to take an action and they can't take an action. But you know, again, that could be part of the deliberate strategy of the game, is to be nasty in that way and absorb all the possible fundings. Or maybe go the other way, absorb all the buildings. Well, all the plots of land anyway. I mean, you can't absorb the buildings because everyone's got their own individual building. So as I said, this game kind of feels familiar probably to a lot of people that have played games in this kind of ilk. Maybe even Acquire kind of is the same kind of feel to this. Not playing it, but hearing that it is the same is just, you know, okay, yeah, fine. In that essence, easy to pick up in that way. 2 players, it's kind of bland, back and forth. Probably with 3 players it's good, 4 players is definitely good, and 5 players it's probably even better. Now the game seems to have its own speed. At the beginning of the game, the first era, land is being snapped up pretty rapidly, without, you know, hindsight or thinking ahead. It just like, okay, yeah, that's next. I want that one. That one. And so the market is depleted pretty quickly. And it's not until it's in the 3rd era that the game kind of slows down and people start really thinking and looking at the board and going, you know what? I need that bit of land because then I can make that building there, which will give me extra points if I lay a civic building next to it, blah, 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 blah. Oh, they've done that. Okay, I'm going to place a civic building. And so the end game seems to slowly chug on, and then in the last rounds, when you see that there's only a few cards in the market and someone's going to end the game possibly, that the game comes to a kind of a chug as everyone goes into analysis paralysis mode, going, okay, how can I max out my points and you know, win at this game? And that's kind of sad, because it kind of like, it was going so well, the middle act is getting at good speed, and then the end is just a slow trudge as players are fumbling over what to do and when to do it. And sometimes it's not possible to end the game because players are so busy spending time, spending money and building, that they have no money to buy those last few cards. And while they're worrying about what they're going to build to try and get more points, they're forgetting to take an income and then use that income to buy the last cards to trigger the end of the game. Sometimes this could be advantageous to someone who's like, okay, I'm in the lead at the moment, but if we play for another 3 or 4 turns, someone else is going to install several buildings which will help them win. I mean, this might be all intentional in the design, but it just kind of, it's not annoying, but it's just like, oh, we were running so well and then we got to a kind of like jogging speed and then we come to a slow crawl, which is nice. But you know, for me, a game should have the same sensation, not the same sensation all the way through, but it should mount. But in this case, it was like, it kind of goes down a little bit. But all in all, it is an enjoyable time. Everyone that we played it with had a good time and said it was a good game, which is a good mark, which means that you can then play it again. Probably then introduce some of the expansions, like the monuments themselves, because that may be another interesting factor, because that kind of feels like the idea from New York 1901, where there are these common buildings that can only be used once by one player, whoever does it, and they are monumentally big and monumentally powerful. So I like that aspect, and I'm looking forward to playing that in the future with the monuments. Probably not the powers, because although that would probably give a bit of replayability, because you'll be having a different starting way or having a different, an advantage over the other players, and they'll have their own different advantages. Again, I haven't looked at it. It sounds interesting. Again, something that I would like to have seen is maybe a randomized board, either by placing tiles down in the spaces after the game's set up, and so different places are in different places, or maybe have the tiles have resources on them, so you require X amount of stone or X amount of clay or X amount of wood or a mixture of all, and the marketplace is not land plots, but it's resources, and then you're buying resources, and it kind of then feels a bit more kind of traditional kind of building, and then, as I said, if they're all tiles, everything's going to be different every time. So something might be very expensive there in one game, and then be something very expensive there in another game, and then there might be a big bunch of expensive stuff together. So like spaces which require loads of stone and loads of clay and loads of wood, and there'll be areas where there's not so much. And so people will be building in different ways and in different places with different resources. But hey, that's just my dream. So let's go to the components of the game. For the 100 and whatever it was that I spent on this game, yes, I did buy it. It's well worth it. You have 5 trays of components for each of the players, and then you have a bonus tray of the monuments. Then you have all the cards and the inlay trays for everything. Everything fits perfectly in the box, as well as everything looks beautiful. But when you're playing, you don't notice that beauty. One of the great things about the game, which facilitate the game really well, is the inlay tray for the buildings, because every time there's a scoring round, you're not having to look at the board to see what you've scored, apart from when you have to score the civic buildings. When you look at your population and when you look at your commercial buildings, you just look at your board and it's marked underneath. So every time you remove a building, it's marked there how many points or how many people or how much money you're going to get, and that is fantastic. And then you have to go to the board, as I said, to score the civic buildings, which is okay, it's good, it works. Sometimes you do miss one, so you have to come up with like a kind of like a word search system of checking to make sure that you've scored for everyone and everything. But yeah, it's astronomical. And as I said, you don't really appreciate the beauty of the buildings while you're playing the game, because you are playing the game. You are trying to figure out everything which is going on and what's your best strategies and, the right road, which does lead to Rome. One of the things that could have done with a bit of love is the coins. The metal coins are very similar to each other. A little tint might have gone a long way. A quick additional content comment. Everything is beautifully arranged in the trays. They have these lovely plastic things which protect them when you stack them up in the box. The rulebook explains how they should be stacked away, which is again perfect. Everything stacks into the game trays, no problems, although some of the cards do slide about because this tray actually goes in sideways into the box, and I'll show you that in a sec. But yeah, everything is out of this world. The only little niggle was placing these tiny little colored tokens in. The rulebook again explained which ones go where. There was no problems with that, but some of them would go into the shape properly, and they had to be kind of hammered in with like one finger on top of another again until they were in place. Let's have a look at a real-time box closing moment. All in all, this is a fun game. I'm happy to have it in my collection in one sense that it is a fun game, and it's, you know, something which people go, ooh, that looks nice because it's big and everything. But on the other hand, it's, oh, it's big and it's taken up a lot of space, and I could have shoved a few more games in that space. But that's the way it is. Will there be a smaller version with printed tiles? We doubt it. It's a great idea. It's a shame that it's not in a kind of more easy to get hold of fashion for just someone walking into a game store and go, oh yeah, I'll get that for 40-50 euros, bang. But there are alternatives. As I said, 1901 is pretty much close to this. As I said, they do the monument kind of thing, but they also do like a bonus road section, which is a nice objective. Maybe that's missing from this as well, having randomized different roads, give you bonus points if you build on it, or bonus powers or something, I don't know. But that's just me spitballing again. But all in all, the game, good, solid, big elephant. If you can find a copy and this interests you, then pick up a copy of Foundation of Rome. And thank you for watching. I hope this video has pointed you in the direction whether this is a game for you or not. Please like this video if you did enjoy it. Don't like it if you didn't like it. You don't have to subscribe. I'm not asking for subscribers. But yeah, just stay tuned. I'll post another video for another game when I've played it a few times and give you my first impressions about it. So until then, take care, look after yourselves, and please play nicely with each other.
Just sitting at the table next to Felicia.